Moonlight check-in, midnight check-out. The hotel taught me how to keep a straight face. That's the first thing you learn in a lobby at midnight. How to hand a key card to a man who smells like someone else's apartment and pretend you can't hear the elevator count every floor of his intention. The Cellini was an old girl with new marble, brass rails polished to a shine that made your conscience blink, velvet furniture the color of midnight plums, a lobby bar that sold courage by the ounce. I worked the night manager shift, the hours when people made choices and asked the city to keep a secret. At home, my wife Mara said I had a talent for discretion. "It's why they trust you," she'd tell me, stealing a kiss under my jaw while I knotted my tie. "Nobody can read your face." Then she'd smooth my lapel like a closing line and disappear into a week of launch parties and client dinners that began as glinting promises and multiplied like rabbits. We had a pact, or what we mistook for one. I would love the quiet and she would love the noise, and we would meet somewhere in the middle with takeout and our feet tucked under each other on the sofa. Things hold until they don't. The first hairline crack was small enough to admire. She started coming home with a scent I couldn't place. Not office air, not wine, not the citrus chaser of an Uber's air freshener. This was careful, expensive, too clean to be an accident. It clung to her sweater like punctuation. One evening she leaned over the sink to rinse a glass and the fragrance lifted. Amber vetiver, a peppermint blade. And suddenly I was very aware that I do scent for a living by proxy. Hotels are chemistry labs disguised as bedrooms. I can name a cologne with my eyes closed the way a musician names a chord from the sound of the room. That night I didn't try. A part of me stood back from the sink, arms folded, letting the rest of me be polite. In the Cellini's logbook I wrote the nightly banalities: room change for a snorer, extra blankets for a couple with too thin a conscience, 2 a.m. cappuccino that wanted to believe it was medicine. I also kept a second ledger inside my head. Linen counts, elevator stops, glances that lasted half a second too long, the concierge bell that tells the truth when nobody else will. She told me she was doing strategic dinners. The client had a cookbook coming out and every table in the city had to pretend to be its friend. She smiled with her teeth and then, later, with her eyes closed. In the morning she left with a scarf that wasn't ours. It was a small error. One thread caught at the corner of my mouth like a seed, and I didn't pluck it. The night I started breathing again, a storm draped the city in a wet velvet so thick the taxis looked like punctuation marks trying to outrun their sentences. Just before midnight the front doors opened, and a woman stepped in like she'd been painted into the room. She shook the rain from her hair with a laugh she aimed at the chandelier, then looked at me and the laugh softened, made itself available for conversation. "I'm supposed to be a dignified adult," she said, setting a suitcase by the desk. "But the rain has opinions about my hair. I'm Noah." "Welcome to the Cellini, Ms. Card," I said, reading the reservation and deciding not to sound impressed by the travel column that lived behind her name. Noah's photographs had made me want places I didn't deserve. "We'll conspire with the weather." We traded paperwork and pleasantries. She had a room on the 8th floor with a balcony that let the city climb into your pockets, and a request for tea that I sent up with a note, and a smile I usually charged for indiscretion. 15 minutes later, the lobby was empty except for the piano's quiet and my pulse rehearsing all the verbs it might need. The elevator chimed. Noah returned in a sweater that was trying to be casual and failing beautifully. "Your balcony believes in drama," she said, sliding onto a bar stool. "How am I supposed to sleep with the river making those eyes at me?" "You're not," I said. "That's why we have an all-night menu and very forgiving chairs." She ordered soup and a glass of wine. I moved around the lobby with my usual choreography, but whenever I looked up, she was there, at the edges of mirrors, reflected in brass, caught in the windows dark like a note you can't get out of your head. The pianist played a tune that could have been a confession. When I carried her tray across the lobby, her knee touched my hand as I set it down. It wasn't deliberate, not exactly, but our bodies took notes anyway. "Thank you, mister." She glanced at my name tag, then back to my face. "Evan, your sleeves are unfair." "Hotel uniform," I said, as if my forearms were a rule I followed. We didn't flirt like amateurs. We let the air do the heavy lifting while we stepped aside and pretended to be furniture. When she stood to say good night, she slid her room key into her sweater sleeve the way women do when they're keeping a trick up their cuff. "You're very good at making a stranger feel like she's already told you a secret," she said. "I'm just good at keeping the lobby quiet," I said. "Same thing," she said, and the elevator doors cut the scene. There are nights you want to tell the truth to a wall just to hear it come back altered. When my phone buzzed, the wall obliged. A notification from our joint card glowed up at me. "Basilica, 2 guests, 11:47. Basilica is a rooftop bar 2 blocks from the Cellini, the kind of place that sells a skyline in slices." Mara had rolled her eyes when it opened. "Too obvious," which is how you know it would be perfect for an affair. I looked at the clock. I looked at my tie. I told the bartender I needed 10 minutes of air, like a man about to step into a different kind of weather. The Basilica's host smiled the smile of a man paid to never ask questions. I took the stairs to the deck and my face learned a new task, how to keep working while it fell apart. There she was, my wife in a dress that turned everyone else's eyes dishonest. The man with her had the easy shoulders of someone whose calendar applauds him. He wore the cologne I had tasted on our pillow, clean, sharp, a peppermint blade. He touched her wrist with 2 fingers like he was checking the time on her body. She laughed and then bit her lower lip as if someone had asked her to keep a secret with her teeth. Our eyes met, not hers and mine, but mine and the waiter's, and he looked away with a kindness I wanted to pay for. I left before the trumpet solo. Back in the lobby, the piano was nursing its last drink. I wrote elevator maintenance in the logbook and underlined it, as if fixing a machine would prove we could keep lifting. At 2:16 a.m., Noah came down in bare feet with her heels looped in one hand, hair a soft storm. "Lightning," she said by way of apology, pointing toward the river. "I can never sleep through a show." "You're excused," I said. "The city's only honest after midnight. What would you like to borrow from it?" "Company," she said, then caught herself, smiled, shook her head. "Tea. I meant tea." We drank chamomile at a table that pretended not to eavesdrop. She asked about the guests who come and go like weather, and I told her stories with names removed and adjectives softened. I don't know why I told her about the couple who danced without music at 3 a.m. in the dark, or the widow who ordered a whiskey and said she was practicing saying his name gently, or the man who checked in with a suitcase too light to hold anything except a decision. Maybe because the skin around her eyes listened. When the lightning moved off to untie some other part of the sky, I walked her to the elevator. We didn't touch. We stood close enough to feel the halo of it and gave our eyes something to pretend to look at. She reached out, pressed an invisible wrinkle from my tie, and withdrew her hand the way you pull back from a stove whose heat you admire. "I should sleep," she said. "You should," I said. We didn't, not right away. The doors opened. She stepped backward into the elevator, eyes on mine, and the animal part of the night held its breath. "Good night, Evan," she said, and just before the doors kissed close, she added, "Don't blink." Morning arrived in the gray suit of a man with a meeting. I showered, changed, made calls, accepted deliveries, ironed out a billing problem with a guest who believed his room should come with a better version of himself. At noon, a bouquet landed on the desk, a volcano of pale peonies and eucalyptus, without a card. The arrangement was exactly Mara's style, a little wild, a little rehearsed. The florist's sticker on the wrap said the sender's name. I peeled it back with a thumb. Marco. I stared at the letters until they stopped being a name and became a shape of door. I wasn't going to walk through. Noah came down wearing sunlight like jewelry. "Find me a corner of the roof," she asked. "I want to shoot the city pretending to be shy." I took her up to the maintenance platform no guest is supposed to know about, where the view smuggles the river past the skyline and the wind rehearses its hands. She set up her tripod. I watched her work. Her body and the camera negotiated with the air. When she finished, she let the strap fall and leaned on the half wall, eyes closed, face turned into the wind. The moment staged itself. "I can smell basil," she said, laughing. "Is that the restaurant across the way, or did someone bottle summer?" "The bar 2 blocks over," I said, tasting the word basilica like a bruise. She looked sideways at me and then, because she wasn't afraid of what she already knew, said softly, "You don't have to tell me, but you can." So I did. Not names, not times, just the shape of the hole in the air and how the edges of it cut a man who'd thought he was made of steadier stuff. I told her how the city could make you both anonymous and seen, and how I had given a key to a stranger and remembered my own front door, and how laughter can be a list of what a person won't admit. I told her about cologne you can't wash out and scarves that arrive in your house without saying where they were before. I told her I had a talent for discretion, and it was killing me by degrees. Noah listened. She didn't rescue me or arrange my sentences. She slid closer until our arms touched from shoulder to wrist, the kind of contact that rewires the room without moving a chair. "You don't look unreadable," she said. "You look like a man finally telling the truth to himself." We stood like that until the sky decided to change outfits. If I turned my head, I would have been kissing her. I didn't. She didn't. We let the wind have the last word. The gallery email arrived that afternoon like a dare. "Opening tonight. Bring your appetite." The artist was one of Mara's favorites, a man who welded steel into curves so tender you wanted to pet them. I forwarded the invite and got a heart emoji back, which felt like being told a poem over the phone. I could have called in sick. I could have walked to the basilica and found a corner in which to learn whether jealousy has a taste. I worked my shift. I counted keys. At 10 minutes to 9, Noah came down in a dress that made the lobby lean toward her. She stopped at the desk and set a card on the marble. "If you ever want to remember how to be looked at, meet me on the mezzanine at midnight," she said. "If you need to be good instead, I'll admire you from 2 floors up." "You make realism sound like fiction," I said. "I make everything look like it can be framed," she said, and was gone. At 11:57, the pianist took a breath, and so did I. I climbed the stairs. The mezzanine is a balcony with chairs that think they're important and a view of the bar that forgives almost everyone. Noah stood with her back to the railing, arms folded, mouth determined. When she saw me, something unclenched behind her ribs and in mine. "I had a speech," she said, "and it was bad." "Then let's not give it," I said. We stood close without touching for a count of 10 that belonged to neither of us alone. Then she reached, and I did too, and our hands met like we'd both been promised this in another life, and the paperwork had finally cleared. The kiss was not cinematic. It didn't need an orchestra. It was just warm and sure and the right size for the room. Her fingers found the back of my neck and learned it. Mine slid along the line of her spine and asked politely to be remembered. We broke once to laugh at the sound the chandelier made, then tried again with more intention and less apology. Somewhere below us, Cutlery made delicate decisions. "That's a start," she whispered, foreheads touching, breath mingling like sensible weather. "I can be patient," I said and meant it. The thing about secrets is that they prefer daylight more than anyone admits. 2 mornings later, coffee between us going cold, I told Mara the very edited truth. I didn't show her the Basilica receipt or say Marco's name. I didn't present an affidavit from the night we began unraveling. I said I was done being a lock she kept losing the key to, and she looked at me like she had forgotten I could be an exit as well as a hallway. We were kind the way you are with a dog you've both loved and neglected. We sold the sofa and gave away the rug. She kept the bowls shaped like commas. I kept the French press and a photograph of us from a summer we deserved. We hugged without theater. When the door closed behind her, the apartment exhaled like fabric. Noah didn't move in. That's not the story. She kept her own keys and an overnight bag that learned a corner of my closet. We learned how to be in rooms without pretending they owed us applause. We walked past the Basilica more than once and didn't look up. She taught me where a camera wants your mouth when you mean what you're saying. I taught her how to make a Negroni that forgives a day. On our best nights, we stood at the mezzanine rail and watched the lobby manufacture small courage for strangers. And then we went home and kept only what we could carry in one trip. Hands, wrists, laughter. A kiss that doesn't need to rehearse. Sometimes I still wake to footsteps in a hallway that isn't mine. Old habits, not ghosts. The Cellini hums through my bones. I button my shirt and knot my tie and make the lobby look like an invitation. If a guest asks me where to find the city's most beautiful lie, I send them to the roof at sunset and tell them to expect nothing. The light will do the rest. I am still very good at keeping a straight face. I am better at choosing when not to. On the nights when rain writes its soft alphabet against the windows, Noah meets me at the desk after last call. We climb to the maintenance platform with 2 mugs of tea and the kind of quiet you can only buy by telling the truth. We stand close and watch the river practice its moves, and when she turns to me, I trace the line from ear to jaw with the back of my fingers, and she closes her eyes like the city finally turned its head to listen. We keep it gentle and just beyond the frame. The camera of the world can film the rest. The important parts belong to us.